Welcome back, dear viewers. You're still watching Nile Cruise on Nile TV, and on a very special day celebrating victory and glory here in Egypt, dear viewers, on the anniversary of the victory of the 6th of October, which we celebrated, of course, and we will continue celebrating during the month of October, dear viewers. Everyone sits in front of the television, of course, television screens, watching to see the favorite films, celebrating or discussing and tackling the war of the 6th of October, of course, which tried to document and tell what happened before and after and during the war. How did cinema deal with the October War and the most important works that monitored the war and before and after, and the impact of these works, of course, is going to be now the subject that we're going to be tackling in this very special segment with Dr. Mariam Khemar, which is a professor of political science at the Cairo University. A very good day, and it's a pleasure to have you with us in today's very special episode of Nile Cruise.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm pleased to be with you today.
Dr. Mariam Waheed, thank you very much for being with us today. If we can speak with the success of the Egyptian cinema in depicting what happened on the 6th of October in 1973 and the war against Israel. How do you see the amount of success which took place in the 70s, the 80s, and until now?
Yeah, there was a big range of films produced tackling the war, either through the war of attrition, which means like the 6 years before the 6th of October war, what really took place in the Egyptian army and how people reacted with this defeat and how they managed to support the army for the victory of 1973. That period was tackled in some movies, and another thing was the early depiction of the first days of movies through something called like documentary films. So it's not long feature films, it's not something based on novels, or it's just like documenting what took place in 1973 in the days of the war. There were also long feature films like in the early days, like 1974, 1975. There were some movies about 1973 war and the war of attrition, like Budur, like The Great Loyalty, like also there was The Sons of Silence. Those were from the important movies. Also, some of those movies tackled some of the psychological aspects and how something related to more about the real life of soldiers and officers and how they interacted with the society. So more related to their psychological build-up and how they were ready for the war.
Meaning the impact of the war on them and how they reacted towards?
That was one thing, but another thing, like the movie Budur, it's about how this officer or soldier was a very good, good-mannered person, and he supported everybody in his society, and something about his personal life besides the war itself, besides what made him go for this war. And the people in his neighborhood, how he interacted with them. So it's more not, it's the very early movies don't have a very holistic picture or everything related to the war. They're just trying to capture some good moments that the director feels, or it reflects his and the scriptwriter, how they felt the war. There was other movies speaking about their reaction after the war. So how they reacted, or how the influence of the war on their personal lives, and like Hatta Akhir al-Umr, for example. That's a very well-known movie for Mahmoud Abdel-Aziz. He was just how he was a soldier who suffered from the war because he was just injured from this war, but his he had a very good esteem, and he managed how to get over the death of some of his colleagues in the war with support of his wife and his friends. So how he could manage to get over this, and he had this good vibes after the war because he saw the victory, and even he was injured, but he still had the motive that he would be cured afterwards. And
الرصاصة لا تزال في جيبي is one of the very important movies that tackled the October War.
Yes.
From your point of view, how did this film handle
Good evening, it's 5 p.m. in Cairo. Time for the Hour's Top Stories presented to you by Manal El-Ibiari. Continuing his visit to Washington, Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli met on Friday with U.S. Democratic Dutch Robert Berger and U.S. Republican Jeff Fortenberry, who are participating in the U.S. House of Representatives group of Friends of Egypt. During the meeting, Madbouli praised the U.S. representatives' efforts to support issues of concern to Egypt in the U.S. House. The Prime Minister stressed Egypt's stance denouncing the Turkish assaults in Syria, calling for the Turkish forces to withdraw from the Syrian territories. Madbouli also reiterated Egypt's constant stance towards the file of the Renaissance Dam, stressing that water is a vital issue to the Egyptian people. Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli also took part in a discussion session at Washington's Middle East Institute with the attendance of Egypt's ambassador and a number of the institute's members of intellectuals, researchers and former congressmen. The Prime Minister reviewed the developments in Egypt since President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi took office, reiterating that adopting the economic reform program has come to avoid an inevitable economic collapse. During the session, Madbouli reviewed as well Egypt's social protection program. Regarding the GERD file, Madbouli said that Egypt supports the development efforts in the Nile Basin. Nevertheless, it won't accept harming the country's rights of the Nile water. Prime Minister Dr. Mustafa Madbouli also held talks with chairman of U.S. Aditran Telecommunication Company, where he praised the undergoing joint cooperation with Aditran Company to build a telecommunication network in the new administrative capital. Madbouli said he is looking forward for more direct investments by the company in different communications fields in the light of Egypt's free trade agreements with various zones worldwide. The Premier also directed the Ministry of Communication to follow up the cooperation files with the U.S. company in the coming period. For his part, the Minister of Communications, who was attending the meeting, has presented a full review on the progress achieved by Egypt in the telecommunication and information technology field through the last years. He also noted that such progress has allowed Egypt to be one of those countries which owns a developed infrastructure in this field and can receive international investments. Sporadic clashes between Turkish forces and Kurdish groups were ongoing in a battleground Syrian border town on Friday, despite Ankara's announcement of a 5-day truce. Earlier, Turkey announced a 120-hour suspension of its offensive, and there was a lull in fighting in much of the rest of northeastern Syria. Under the deal reached after U.S. Vice President Mike Pence flew to Ankara, Kurdish forces are required to withdraw from a border strip 32 kilometers deep, which will become the safe zone long sought by Turkey. Britain's exit from the European Union hung on a knife edge on Friday as British Prime Minister Boris Johnson scrambled to convince doubters to rally behind his last-minute European Union divorce deal in an extraordinary vote in Parliament. In one of the most striking flourishes of the three-year Brexit drama, Johnson confounded his opponents on Thursday by clinching a new deal with the EU that had promised it would never reopen a treaty it agreed last year. Yet Johnson, the face of the Brexit campaign in the 2016 referendum, must now ratify the deal in the British Parliament, where he has no majority and opponents are plotting maximum political damage ahead of an imminent election. That's all for now. Thanks for watching. This is Manal El-Ibiari signing off.
The Bullet Is Still in My Pocket is a movie based on a novel by Hussein Abd al-Quddus. And this movie is tackling also, it's a bit symbolic because it's his fiancée in the village is being raped by some of the big corrupt people inside the village. And this was a symbol of Egypt that was the land of Sinai, which was taken from us in 1967. So he wanted to take revenge from this corrupt person as Egyptians wanted to take revenge from the Israelis after taking our land. So that's a bit symbolic. It's like a metaphor. Yeah. And we have a lot of movies that are really symbolic, and like the woman or the lady is just a symbol for Egypt. So that's a bit a symbol in some of our movies.
Doctor, you said that at the beginning of writing a scenario depicting what happened in 1973, it evolved through time. How did you see the development of writing a scenario or a novel telling the story of the 1973 war?
Some movies captured like some operations, like Eilat, there's a movie of like capturing specific events. Maybe that would be more condensed and more, and also commemorating some of the victories of like the Line of Sinai. That was a recent movie capturing also one of the victories that took place during the war. So some of those movies tackled or were speaking more about, for example, the way or the path towards 1973, like أغنية على الممر, which is a very important movie in my opinion, because it's just capturing the moments of the soldiers and how they were ready for the war. During the war of attrition, they were ready towards victory, and they cared about Egypt, and there were a lot of conversations happening between those soldiers, a lot of songs that were sung in the movie that captured also the atmosphere, and there was a very famous song which is تعيش ضحكة مصر, which means like that long live like the smile of Egyptians, or laughter of Egyptians. And so it's just like even through defeat, Egyptians are ready for also preparation. So the movement from the idea of defeat from the 1967 till 1973 towards victory, this movement or this it was more about a transitional phase that Egyptians were sure that they will achieve victory.
Doctor, of course, there's no doubt that Days of Sadat, the film, of course, is one of the important historical works that we witnessed in Egyptian cinema. Could you tell us more about it?
Yes, that movie is one of the movies. It's not it's tackling the war, of course, but it's covering a lot of the great events that took place during Sadat's life, and his since his upbringing, and how he also his life. So more about the main historical junctures through his life. So what took place in 1956, what took place in 1973, and his interaction with the power centers, different episodes from the life of Sadat. So
on the other hand, we did see Ahmed Zaki playing the same
exactly,
role as Anwar Sadat and Gamal Abdel Nasser at the same time. How was he president at both movies, but very different in different eras?
Yes, he was a great actor, and he was very successful in playing both roles. I personally like Sadat movie because I think he's just capturing the way he talks, the way he behaves, everything related. He studied him very well, and Ahmed Zaki is well known that he used to study the character very well and be totally
He used to
Yes.
personalize the character
Yes.
exactly. We used to believe when we were watching that we're really watching President Anwar al-Sadat or President, of course, Gamal Abdel Nasser,
Yes.
because he excelled actually when he was playing both films. Doctor, of course, Egyptian cinema stopped, unfortunately, producing cinemas productions related to the October War until we reached recently El Mamar, or The Passage, where it was discussing and tackling before the October War. Your motto on this film?
Yeah, there were some movies like, for example, حائط البطولات, like The Line of Sinai. Those were recent movies about the 6th of October war. But this movie is received great.
Definitely.
Yes, it was.
It was a success, and
It was a
hit.
success, and a lot of children, a lot of youth watched the movie, and it was even screened on the television, and a lot of people watched
it.
it.
Was screened on Channel 1, and it was screened on the Egyptian satellite, and on other private TVs, of course. But what was special about this film that made it a hit?
I guess it's the timing of the movie, and also that it's a very big production, and it was not produced by the state, but filmmakers who loved this to capture the great victories of the army, and they wanted to highlight this victory, and it was based on the war of the events took place in the War of Attrition in 1967, and it tackled a different operation that we didn't see it before. So it's maybe the difference is that we saw something new. We saw the different battles on screen, shot in a very good way, and it's very high technology in showing those battles. And so that made it popular, and people wanted to watch their famous actors playing the roles of
exactly.
army.
The actors excelled as well during
Yes.
during the actors excelled in their roles in this film. They were extremely good.
And
Yeah,
I believe that on the street, if a woman in Egypt asked another woman in Egypt about the success of Al-Mamar, she would have mentioned Ahmed Azza only. Not the cast, not the roles.
I guess that it's not
true what you're
Yes.
saying, by the way.
Yeah, he's just very popular and the star, of course. But I guess that they wanted to see Al-Mamar. They wanted to see the passage itself. They didn't go for to pay the ticket for just big stars in this movie. I guess so. I guess they wanted just to see what's this about. They wanted to show their kids also something, a victory that we did, that we need nowadays to highlight. To showcase and to tell the children, even though that we elderly we usually watch أغنية على الممر and the رصاصة لا تزال في جيبي. Those are very popular, but they wanted to show them to go to the cinema, to take their kids as an outing. That's part of cinema, so it's not just seeing it at homes, but it's the idea that it's part of the cinematic experience, that you go and see this on screen in a dark room, and to see the light coming over from the screen and see this. And I myself saw it 2 times on television.
Many people actually watched Al-Mamar more than once. Many.
Yes.
Many of my friends, they discussed going once and twice. The film was very glamorous and was very successful.
Especially at the cinema itself. So
yes.
it's
they went to the cinema,
yes.
actually.
No, I just watched it on TV afterwards. But it's that was very nice to capture our victories.
So the idea that the film was screened on Channel 1 and on the Egyptian satellite channel makes a very special significance to this film, actually.
Yes, of course, and I've heard that some people watched it on cafes with each other, as if they usually gather for to see other stuff, but they wanted to see this. and to gather with each other, seeing.
And recently, we did see President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi honoring the cast of
Yes.
Al-Mamar, The Passage, and praising the role of the cast as well and the film producers. He said that it is more about uniting the Egyptians towards Egypt, not just the army, not just the war of attrition or just the 1973 October War victory. It's about uniting the Egyptians for a cause, even if it's a film. How do you see the importance of supporting soft power by the president?
I think that movies are not about capturing some events. Otherwise, it's just like you read some stuff, you read some historic documents or to know about the war. It's about the feeling that you get out after watching a movie. If you don't have a feeling after you see a movie, it's just like it didn't impact you. It didn't have change your outlook or change your vision of what's taking place in the whole world, and so your feelings and should change out after watching a movie. And I guess that a lot of people after watching the movie, they even clapped for the in the cinema itself.
Yes.
They clapped for what was taking place. They felt that that was very significant, and I guess it had an impact.
Dr. Mariam, can we dream of producing another production such as, or like Al-Mamar, of course, to monitor the great operations of our soldiers in Sinai against the enemy?
Yes, I guess that more movies can be produced, and if a movie is like produced about the interaction between the soldiers and society, and that would be very good to capture some of the moments that we don't know or the public doesn't know much about. It's always good to know more, to understand more what was taking place. That would be very good.
Why do you think that we stopped producing those films as they have popularity here in Egypt, supporting the armed forces, supporting the army, and more specifically, if we can depict an operation which took place on the ground by the Egyptians against the Israelis? Why do you think we stopped for maybe 20, 25 years producing big films like this?
It was something related to Egyptian cinema, that the production itself. It was related in the 1980s. There were a lot of production for just like movies for just entertainment. We don't want something that based on ideas, and so producers didn't treat films with consciousness that we want to send political messages through films, because they just cared for increasing their revenues. But the idea is not that it's not contradicting to produce movies with a message and also to get revenues and to support the industry, and so it's not contradicting. So it's just the belief of the producers that they want to do this, and they can make a good movie out of this. And because films, you have to film industry, you have to get revenues to continue other movies. If you don't get money,
It's like investing.
It's like investment, but investment, it can be also through like sending political messages, and that was, I guess it didn't stop, but maybe it didn't like be frequently produced. So it's not just that those movies stopped.
Dr. Mariam, we're at the Museum of President, of course, late President Anwar al-Sadat. How do you think that cinema can make the best out of such an amazing place?
Like documentary movies, this is a very good place where there's a lot of belongings of President Sadat, and also what I liked are the declassified documents over there from the Camp David Accords, and so it's a very good documentation of that. People should know what were the letters sent between Carter and Sadat during the Camp David Accords, and also what took place in the peace treaty of the Egyptian-Israeli peace treaty. So that was the declassified documents written on it, confidential, that they weren't for the public before. But we have to read what took place and to understand the vision of Sadat, because he had this vision of living for peace. So how he achieved this peace, and can be it's apparent in this museum. And also what I liked is like a maquette for the soldiers crossing the Bar-Lev Canal, the Suez Canal, and during the war also.
Yes, Dr. Mariam Waheed, you can go on.
Oh, yeah.
Dr. Mariam Waheed, the professor of political science at Cairo University. Thank you very much for being with us today on Nile Cruise.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dievue. Stay with us. We'll be back again with another segment.